students, today's agenda is that we're going to do a warm-up. We'll be working with two weight tables and you will be able to do 5.3. Today, students will be able to make two weight tables, find relative and conditional relative frequencies, and use relative frequencies to find conditional probabilities. For the warm-up, you're given some information in a Venn diagram, and what you will do is just fill out the two-way frequency table. So pause the video so that you can try it. It says, in a survey, 85 students respond about whether they play an instrument and whether they participate in sports. So it's 85 students total. Out of those 85, some people play an instrument, and that is including all of this, okay? All the circle. And some people play a sport. Again, it's the entire circle. But these 25, which belong to this group, and also to this group, do both play an instrument and play a sport. However, there are 5 people who do not play either an instrument or a sport. And so what we're going to do is first fill in the blanks in here. So for this part is joint information that have these two characteristics. So on this side is students playing or not playing an instrument. On this side is playing or not playing sports. So this one right here, 25, says that they play a sport and play an instrument. That's this group right here. Okay? They play both an instrument and sports. For this one, is for the people who play a sport but do not play an instrument. In that case, it's play a sport, but take away those 25 that play the instrument, so it's only 33 people. Then we can add that 25 students and 33 students play a sport, so that's a total of 58. That includes the people who play an instrument and who do not play an instrument, but all of them play a sport. In here it says does not play a sport but play an instrument. So those people from here that play an instrument but do not play a sport, we'll take away those. It's only 22. Together, those students that play an instrument together, including the ones that don't play a sport and the ones that do play a sport, it's a total of 47. Then in here for this column is people who do not play an instrument. That means it's all these people, they play a sport, but they do not play an instrument, plus these 5 right here. Okay, so it's this group plus the ones that are outside of playing an instrument. So basically you're just excluding this right here. It's just this 2, 33 plus 5 is 38. For this row, it says does not play a sport. That includes these 22 students, right? Does not play a sport. So not those, but that means the 22 and the 5, or you can just add 22 plus 5 is 27. So I'm going back and forth so that you can see the relationship, but in reality, you can just figure out these two and then just add down for the columns and add horizontally for the rows. One other thing that it's important to understand is that if you add the 58 plus 27, that's equals to the 85 students who are surveyed. And you add them in here, it's 85, but you also add them in here and it's still 85. And another thing is that if you add all of this, which is inside, which is called the joint probability, you use this one with the total is also 85. Okay, now that we have the information in the two-way table, let's get some information. It says, how many students play an instrument? Well, you see the word play an instrument and you have to go all the way to the end because it includes the students who play a sport also and the ones who don't play a sport. But as long as they play an instrument, that's what we're interested in. In that case, it's 47. And if you wanted to find the marginal, this is in the margin, right? These are used for the marginal probability. Those need to be divided by the total of students. So 47 divided by 85 will give you the marginal probability. Only when you're dividing this by the total, then that's marginal. But if you divide this by the total, then that's going to be joint probability. The next one says, how many students play a sport? Play a sport is down here. That's on the left. So you have to go all the way to the right to know how many in total play a sport. So that's 58. How many students play an instrument and play a sport? Well, that's joint. When you see this word and, that means you go to play a sport, play an instrument, and whatever they meet, that's your joint value, which is 25. How many students do not play an instrument and do not play a sport? Does not play a sport, does not play an instrument. It's 5. So whenever you see this, that's joint. With the symbol will be like this again, okay? How many students play an instrument and do not play a sport? Play an instrument, does not play a sport. That will be 22. 22 out of 85. Again, word and means you would use this symbol. So for the warm-up, we didn't find any of those probabilities. It's just the total number that did this activity, just to identify it and to warm up. We filled out the two-way table from the Venn diagram. Let me show you how that will look in writing. So it says, in a survey, 85 students respond about whether they play an instrument and whether they participate in sports. Out of 47 students who play an instrument, so that's giving us play an instrument, right? Out of the 47 students who play an instrument, the 47 will go down here. Not only that, but 85 students were surveyed. That's the total of totals. Total. 25 also participate in sports. So out of the 47 who play an instrument, 25 of them also participate in sports. That means they play an instrument and play in sports. That's how you would fill that out, okay? 25. Again, read this part. Out of 47 students who play an instrument, 25 of them also play a sport. And you know what? I'm missing in here. Of all students, 5 do not participate in sports and do not play an instrument. Sorry about that. So of all students, 5 do not participate in sports and do not play an instrument. So that will be this value right here. They do not play a sport and they do not play an instrument. That's 5. And so if you notice, they have given us 4 pieces of information, and from there we can figure out the rest. For example, in here, we know that those students who play an instrument is 47. Well, 25 of them play a sport, but then there are some students who do not play a sport. And what we can do is just subtract 47 minus 25 and get the value for those students who play an instrument but do not play a sport. And 47 minus 25, that's 22. And from here, we can, anytime you have 2 pieces of information, we can find the last one. In here, on this column, we cannot find it because we only have one number, one value. And we cannot figure 2 of them from one value. However, on this direction, but together for those who do not play a sport, just add them. 22 plus 5 is 27. In here, this is the total of students who do not play a sport. We can figure out by subtracting this number from here, 85 minus 27. Well, 85 minus 27. We borrow. 15 minus 7 is 8. 7 minus 2 is 5. So 58. So notice how when we have a total, we just subtract. But when we have two partials to get the total, we just add them. And here we have a total. So 58 minus 25, that's going to be 58 minus 25 gives us 3. So that's 33. In here, we need to get the total, so we add them. 33 plus 5, that's 38. Now that you have found the values on the two-way table, now we can create a relative frequency table. And I'll tell you what that means as well after we finish it. So in a calculator, what you're going to do is each number or value, you're going to divide by the total, which in this case is 85. Every single one, you will find the decimal form. So 25 divided by 85, and we're going to use 3 decimal spaces, rounding the third, which is to the thousands, okay? So 0.294, the 4 stays as 4 because if the fourth number is 4 or less, this stays the same. But if this is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then this goes up 1. The next one is 33 divided by 85. And that's 0.388. Again, the 2 does not give anything to the 8. This one, which is in the margin, notice how the background is a little darker. This and these are called marginal values, okay? It's in the margin. 58 divided by 85. That's 0.682. The 3 does not give anything to the 2. 22 divided by 85. And here is 0.259. Again, the fourth number after the decimal is an 8. If it's 5 and more, then it gives 1 to the third number. So 259. Okay, that one gave 1 to the first 8. The next one is 5 divided by 85. And that's 0.05. Again, because there is an 8, the 8 gives 1 to that one, and it's 9 now. 27 divided by 85. 0.318. The next one is 47 divided by 85. 47 divided by 85. 0.55. What do you think it is? 3, because the next one is a 9. Anything 5 or more gives 1 to the previous number. 38 divided by 85. And that's 0.447. And notice how 85 divided by itself, by 85, equals 1. The other thing is that if you add these values, it'll give you 1. And if you add these two values, it'll give you 1 as well. Sometimes it's a little off, just a tiny bit, because we are rounding numbers, and so it might go a little extra, a little over, or less, okay? So let's check. 0.682 plus 0.318 equals 1, which is 100%. On the other side, 553 plus 0.447 equals 1. What does these values represent? We're going to understand it more when we start working on the joint probability, marginal probability, and conditional probability. However, what I want you to know is that this is actually, now that we divided by the 85, you can find the probability in decimal form directly in here. And these values right here, those are called joint probability. And these values right here, because they're in the margin, they're called marginal probability, which we'll see when we start solving some of them, okay? What is it? Why is it joint probability? Because you're joining two categories. Okay, let me move it up. Again, joint probability, marginal probability, because it's in the margin. Joint because you're joining two categories. So people who play a sport and play an instrument is 0.294. People who do not play an instrument but play a sport is 0.388. And the total of them together is 0.682. So this, if you add this together as well, you will get this value. Okay. Same here. People who do not play a sport but play an instrument, you join them and that's the value. Okay. So let's start looking at this. That's what joint probability and marginal probability, that's joint and marginal. And if you don't have these relative frequency tables, you can just do, when they're asking this, well, joint, first of all, it says, what is the probability that a person plays an instrument and participates in sports? That's when you go like that. Plays an instrument, participates in sports, that's the value. You can also just get it directly from the first table, which is this number, play an instrument, play a sport, 25 divided by 85, and you will get this value. However, because we have the relative frequency table, we already have that value. We already divided that by the total of 85. So we already know that people who play an instrument and participate in sports, it's already that in decimal form. Or we can just put 25 divided by 85. We divide it, which is what we did to get that value, and we get 0.294. Sometimes they're going to ask you to simplify this fraction because we might get the answer in fraction form, but not this, rather the simplified form. So why don't we do that instead of putting the answer directly? So 25 and 85 both are divisible by 5. And so we get 25 divided by 5 is 5. 85 divided by 5 is, we get 1, and then 35, 7. Let me see if I can zoom a little. And so now we cannot simplify anymore. So that's when we can divide. Again, we already know 5 divided by 17 is the 0.294, which is right here. Okay, we already have that information in the relative frequency table. I just want you to see the relationship of all of them. You can get the answer directly from the first table or from the relative frequency table now that you created it. So when they're asking you these questions, they might give you multiple choice. Again, that's why we simplify. They might give you the answer in a simplified fraction, not the original. They might give you the answer in a decimal, or they might give it to you as a percent. So all you have to do for the percent is move it 2 spaces to the right, and it's going to be 29.4%. Okay. So that's for number 1. For number 2, it says, what is the probability that somebody doesn't play an instrument and participates in sports? Doesn't play an instrument and participates in sports or plays in sports is this right here. So I'm going to ask you to put the value from the first table. So have it there with you. It's 33 divided by the 85. 33 divided by 85, we already have the information. It's 0.33. 388. Okay, and we move it for the percent, move it 2 spaces, so it's 38.8%. How do we know it's this one? Again, doesn't play an instrument, and participates in sports, it's this one right here. Okay, but you might have this symbol, or you might have the word and. Okay, for joint probability, it's and. This represents the word and. Number 3 says, what is the probability that the person plays an instrument, right there, and doesn't participate in sports, does not play a sport? It's this probability. If you look at the other table, it's 22 out of 85. 22 is divisible only by 2 and by 11. This is not divisible by 2 or 11, so that's it. We divide 22 by 85, but we already did it to create the relative frequency table. It's 0.259. We move it 2 spaces, and so it's 25.9%. So those are joint probability. If you notice, all these values are from inside of that rectangle. For marginal probability, again, we already have the probability in decimal form, but I would like for you to still do it in fraction form so that you can be ready with that. Okay, so let me see if I can fit some of it in here. And I'll do the conditional on a separate sheet of paper. Okay, so number 4. What is the probability that a person participates in sports? In here, when it has only one category, it's only participating in sports. So participate in sports is all the way to the left. It refers to the value all the way to the right. Okay, so in this case, it will be 58. If you look at the other one, people who play a sport is this right here. Okay, so it's 58 out of 85. And we notice in here that 85 is divisible by 5 or by 17, but 58 is divisible by, but 58 is not divisible by any of those, so we can just divide. However, we already have that information. It's 58 divided by 85 is this value, right? 58 divided by 85, but we already have the division, so it's 0.682. In percent, you just go 2 spaces to the right, and it's 68.2%. So that's marginal because it refers to the value in the margins. Okay. Number 5. What is the probability that a person does not play an instrument? Does not play an instrument, it's up here. So you go all the way down. When it's on the top, you just go all the way to the bottom. When it's on the left, you go all the way to the right. When it's only one category. In this case, it will be, if you look at the other table, it's 38 divided by 85. And again, you can check if 38 is divisible by either 5 or 17. It's not, so we're just going to put the does not play an instrument, just put the answer. Or you can divide again, 38 divided by 85, and you will get that number. 0.447, but why not use the relative frequency table since we already have it? Move it 2 spaces to the right, and it's 44.7%. So the probability that a person does not play an instrument is 44.7%, the same as 0.447 or 38 over 85. Number 6, what is the probability that a person plays an instrument? Plays an instrument is up here, so it goes all the way down here, which if you look at the other table is 47 out of the 85. 47 divided by 85. We cannot simplify any of the two. We can divide them, but again, we have that value in there, so it's 0.5 0.53. We move it 2 spaces to the right and it's 55.3%. So those are the joint and marginal probabilities. And pretty fast, let's go back to our objective. We already made the two-way tables. We found the relative frequencies. And now it says that we're going to find conditional relative, but we're going to use those relative frequencies of the joint and marginals to be able to find the conditional. Okay, so what is conditional probability? Conditional probability means that we already know that the participants are part of one of those two categories. We already know, and it's actually the second word in here. So let me show you how. The other thing that we need to know is that it has this symbol right here. And in the next lesson, we're going to see specific ways of how to read it in some word problems, how to find that it's talking about the conditional probability. But in here, it's given to you as a symbol. So what it means is, what is the probability that a person plays an instrument knowing that the person participates in sports? This is like knowing. We already know that the group that this refers to is only this group. Okay, so I usually say that what you can do, first of all, circle the second word or category, and you're going to cover everything else except that column or that row. Participate in sports. So it's this one right here. What does that mean? Well, I will cover all the other information and just leave uncovered the row. If it's on the left, it's going to be a row. If the word was on top, the second word was on top. Okay, so if it's in the left, then I have a row that is not covered. Okay, so knowing that the person, okay, what is the probability that they play a sport, play an instrument, knowing that the person participates in sports. And so that number, the person, we're going to get the total of those people who participate in the sport, which is all the way over here. Again, you can use that value if it's asking you in decimal, but you can go directly to this one as well. I'm going to do both so that you know how to work with both. So it's that value in the other table is 58. That goes in the denominator. Okay, this is 58 in the other table. So again, you would do the same thing here if you were using the other table, the one with values instead of decimals. So you only leave that uncovered, and so in the denominator you put the 58, but then for the numerator you're going to find the joint probability. That's why they say that you use relative frequencies to find the conditional probability in the objective, because you're using both again, the marginal and the joint, where you have play an instrument and participates in sports. Play an instrument, participates in sports is the value, which play an instrument, plays a sport is 25. Okay. Now you divide that. In here, you are not going to find it in decimal form directly from the table. You do have to divide them. And the reason is because now you're dividing this by this value, or this by this value, which is this one divided by that one, or that one divided by that one. You will get the same answer. Let me show you. $25 divided by 58 is 0.431. If you decide to use this one, is 0.294 divided by that one, which is 0.682. Again, 0.431. Okay, you get the same if you divide the decimals or the whole numbers. We move it 2 spaces and you get 43.1%. What does that mean? Again, when you have conditional probability, it means that basically we're going to put the names. It means that we're going to put only the names of students who play a sport, and of that group, you're going to select a name, and the probability that the person also plays an instrument is 43.1%. Okay, so plays an instrument and plays a sport is 43.1% out of the 58 only, not the 85. Basically, we're not including these people right here. Okay, what is the probability that the person doesn't play a sport, knowing that we're going to choose from the people who play an instrument? Okay, again, what are we going to look for? The first item we need to look at is play an instrument. Oh, play an instrument. That means we're going to cover everything except the playing an instrument. Play an instrument, this column right here. We go all the way to the margin. That's why it says that you're looking at the marginal and the joint probability to be able to look at conditional probability. Okay, this is conditional. Conditional probability. And for conditional probability, basically the formula later on, you're going to learn that conditional probability is equal to probability of event, probability of, whoops, probability of both A and B happening over the probability of event B already known. Place an instrument is 47, the total. And both does not play a sport and play an instrument, does not play a sport and play an instrument is 22. Okay, for the numerator is where both meet. For the denominator, the marginal value. If you decided to, instead of dividing the original values, and you're given only a relative frequency table, what you do is then place an instrument, go all the way to the margin, and that's in the denominator, 0.553. In the numerator is where both meet, doesn't play a sport, plays an instrument. It's this one right here, so 0.259. Why am I writing both? It's just in case, because sometimes you're given the values just in the frequency table, okay? So better be prepared. So notice how 22 divided by 47 is 0.468. But if we decide to use the relative frequency table, 0.259 divided by 0.553, 0.468. Okay, in percent, we just move the decimal 2 spaces, and that's 46.8%. Again, it doesn't matter if you use the values in the relative frequency table and divide them, or the actual values from the two-way table, and you still get the same answer. Again, for conditional probability, the probability that event A happens knowing that event B already happened is the probability of both A and B, where they meet, divided by the second event. right? Event B. What is event B? Is this one right here. What is the probability that a person chosen at random plays an instrument knowing that we're selecting it from the people who don't play a sport? Okay, does not play a sport is this right here. Cover that as well. And you know what? I'm going to get the help of these two pens to cover the other information. So now we only have the row where it says, so now we only have the row that says does not play a sport, right? Because that's the second word, that's what we pay attention to. If it's on the left, we have our row. If it's on the top, then we're going to have a column. So what goes in the denominator? 27 is the total of those who don't play a sport. In the decimal form is 0.318. What goes in the numerator? Well, the probability that both A and B happen. So the joint probability of both. Plays an instrument and does not play a sport. Plays an instrument, you can barely see it. Plays an instrument is the first one, and does not play a sport is right there. Okay, same here. Plays an instrument and does not play a sport. Where they meet is 22. And on this one is 0.259. We divide that. 22 divided by 27 is 0.81. And then the 8 gives 1 to the 5, so it's 5.815. If we decide to use the relative frequency table, then it's 0.259 divided by 0.318. Again, it's 0.81. Notice how in this case, we don't round up to the 5. And that's okay. On the test, if I notice that it's only a tiny amount on the thousands difference, because you decide to use this one and I use this one, that's fine. Both are going to count because I know that sometimes there will be a tiny difference between the two. Okay, so if you use this one, this is going to be your answer. If you use this one, it's going to be 0.814, and I'll still validate that because it's super close to my answer. Because it's close to this one. Okay, whichever you use, you'll be fine. And there is only going to be a tiny difference. In percent, 2 spaces, so it's 81.5%. For the next lessons, I want you to pay very close attention to this because this is going to be the formula that we're going to be using when finding some conditional probabilities that do not come from the table, but you have a better understanding. Oh, this playing an instrument and doesn't play a sport is joint probability, meaning that they have both categories, okay? And this is the condition. We already know that it's only from this group of people, only from the 27 students. And you can very much support our channel by giving us a thumbs up, subscribing around here. This is the link to the next lesson. And here you can find the link to the entire unit. Now you're able to do 5.3 and have fun.